All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and welcome to our session, Make Your Money Work for You. I am Inka Skinner. I am the chair for Women of Ivey as my non-day job. And as my day job, I'm an analytics and artificial intelligence leader at one of the largest consulting firms, Accenture. So in terms of Make Your Money Work for You, I'm sure some of you may have heard or read the Globe and Mail recent survey, how the financial stress is taking a toll on the young Canadians. It's a very timely topic, especially after the COVID year we had or still having. We want to make sure that we have this panel that we brought in terms of some knowledge on how do we make our money work for us, because sometimes it feels the other way around, or probably most of the time it feels the other way around. So before we start and I start introducing the panelists, I just want to say again, for people who are coming in as joining, we had 328 participants for this event registered, and we're already over 100 participants right now, and as they're coming in through as well. So why don't we start with a quick poll? You will be seeing that poll coming your way. Feel free to take a few seconds to be candid about what that answer would be. So the first poll is, how do you feel about money? Anxious, confused, satisfied, confident? We thought of a lot more options, but we figured that we'll stop at these 4. Thank you, Jenny, for coordinating this. Jenny is in our alumni relationships, who's managing this whole call and coordinating it for us and doing her magic, so which is great. We'll give it a few seconds and see what the response comes out to be from our 115 participants. Wow, look at that. Anxious is obviously the top, 34%, very closely followed by confused. Satisfied is 26%, confident is less. I'm not surprised at the response at all. That makes sense, and I hope this session will be helpful for you. So before, again, we start diving into some of our wonder and hearing from our wonderful panelists, why don't we go to the second poll? This would be probably more of a quiz, just to test your knowledge. There are no prizes for getting the best answer. However, we thought we wanted to see how many people actually know. I'll be honest, I did not know this answer. One of our panelists was able to help me with it. So we'll give another few seconds for our 121 participants. How much do you think a 30-year-old making 120K a year needs to have saved by the time they retire? And the retirement age we took as 65. Some of you might think that you don't want to retire by then, or some of you might think that you want to retire well before that. But for the purpose of this question, we said 65. We'll give it a few seconds from our 122 participants and see what the answer is. Thank you, Jenny. Let's see what the responses are. So our 124 participants says the winning answer is 3.3 million. Yes, that is correct. It just followed by 2.25. That was my guess. So I appreciate people who are thinking that way as well. 4.1 million, 7% of you thinking that. That's very, very ambitious, but that's pretty good too. Well, thank you so much. So as I said, I want to start off with our first panelist, Madiha Khan, who's the founder of Toronto Condo Investments and real estate salesperson, and she specializes in all things condo, including the pre-construction condo. So Madiha, as I look at this anxious and not so confident about money and the responses, and I look at the prices of real estate, do you think now is a good time to buy real estate?
Thanks, Inka. Yes, I do think it's a good time to buy real estate. And that's not just a sales pitch. If we look at the real estate market over the pandemic in the past 18 months, prices have gone up. The housing prices and the condo prices have gone up. Prices have gone up in the 416 and the 9 to 5 regions. Interestingly, these price increases took place all with closed borders. So there was no immigration, no international students, and no foreign buyers. This was all local, domestic, national demand, heightened demand that led to rapid and some record-breaking price increases and sales and lease activity all in a pandemic. There have been recent headlines in the news that Ontario will need 1 million new homes over the next 10 years to satisfy the demand of 2.27 million immigrants coming to the province. In a typical year, we have around 70,000 new housing units. That's all housing types. To satisfy that demand of 2.27 million new people, we will need around 100,000 new housing units a year. We're not even close to delivering that yet on the supply side. That's not easy to solve. If it was, perhaps our government would have solved that by now. But that is also the opportunity to buy real estate and hold for the longer term, because we know there's definitely a demand for it. And we see that where the cost side is heading as well. Costs are increasing across the board. The land prices are increasing, taxes are increasing, construction costs are increasing. So if you think it's expensive right now, just wait and see where the prices go. I work with many investors, and those investors on the sidelines today are the same investors who've been on the sidelines for the past 5 or 10 years. They're waiting for the bubble to burst or the market to crash. If you look at the past 10 years, Toronto's real estate market has been very strong. Just this past quarter, Q3 2021, over 7,000 new pre-construction condos were sold in the GTA. That's the most number of units sold in a third quarter in the past 10 years. This is happening in the pandemic year as the economy is recovering. So savvy investors are taking advantage of the prices today, getting into the market to buy and hold real estate for the long term, because we know tomorrow is going to be more expensive. And I often remind clients, it's not about timing the market, it's about the time you spend in the market. So I would say, know what your investment goals are, get into real estate now, and buy and hold for the longer term.
That's great. Thank you, Maliha. I wish I had that kind of an advice when I was in my younger stage as well. So this is very, very timely. It's interesting you use the word investment goals. So I want to introduce our next panelist, David Schefter, and he is an experienced financial advisor at Raymond James, working primarily with professionals and business owners. And he combines the art and science of personal finance and investment that is very tailored to them. So David, in your experience, what are the most common financial mistakes that high-end professionals tend to make, if at all?
Sure. Thanks so much, Inka. Great to be here. And hello to everybody who's watching. In the work that I do with clients, what I find is that high-earning professionals tend to make a lot of the similar mistakes that you find in the general population when it comes to personal finance. These are the classic things like failure to put together a cash flow plan or to budget adequately, inability or unwillingness to think about risk management when it comes to your finances, and guided by an overall vision or strategy. So the problems and mistakes themselves are very similar, but the way that those manifest is different in the group of high earning professionals relative to the general population. Many professionals, exactly, or should I say specifically those with a finance or business school background, tend to bring that expertise to the table, and they have a really, really sophisticated, detailed way of thinking about the investing side of things, but they also have other blind spots in their financial situation that they're not adequately addressing. One of the things that I find really interesting when it comes to personal finance is this concept of behavioral and cognitive biases. Now, we all have them. Anyone from an amateur investor, a first-time investor, to a professional experienced investor. As human beings, we all have inherent biases, but some of us have different ones. And sometimes with experienced professionals, what we find is their bias are to have certain blind spots, and possibly to have a sense of overconfidence. I've seen situations where, young professionals with a finance background are putting together a detailed DCF analysis on a stock pick, but they have no idea how much money's coming in and out the door on a monthly basis. as their foundation. So unless you're building those foundational steps, you're going to run into problems. Another way that overconfidence manifests itself is in terms of strengths and weaknesses. And what I find is a lot of professionals bring a great deal of vigor and critical thinking to their work, but don't always bring that same sense of critical thought to their own personal finances. They don't perhaps adequately address the strengths and weaknesses that all of us naturally have. And so flowing from that, they don't often reach out for the professional assistance to fill in those gaps where there are weaknesses that take place. So that's a big thing that's maybe a little bit different than the general population. And then specific to young professionals, one of the interesting phenomena you find when somebody progresses in their career and has their income scale up quite rapidly is there's a tendency to have your lifestyle scale up just as quick or perhaps even quicker. And again, unless you're guided by a sense of perspective and an overall vision, it can be very easy to let these things spiral out of control. And then you're kind of behind and you feel like you're having to catch up. So those are some of the ways that financial mistakes tend to manifest for higher earning professionals relative to the general population.
Thanks, David. That's very interesting to know, considering that especially the people who has put in the DCF and doesn't know how much money coming in and out. But, in this world, I also find there's so many financial instruments that are out there. For example, when I went to the workforce, and maybe I'm dating myself here, there was no financial instruments called Tfsa. And, the advantages of that is just incredible. So I want to introduce our next panelist, Kristine Beese, who's the founder and CEO of Untangle Money, who helps women take control of their money. So Kristine, in your opinion, why is it important to have a financial plan?
Thanks, Inka. I'm happy to be here. A financial plan, in general, in life, anytime you have a plan, you're more likely to reach your goal. I think we all know this. And the bonus is that when you talk about a financial plan, it has the benefit of reducing your financial anxiety, which is something that we saw in the poll earlier and that we read in the news a lot, plagues a lot of Canadians. And the reason it helps is it defines where you are, it defines where you're going, and it defines how you're going to get there. Time, when it comes to money, time is your biggest ally. And when you have so get a plan really soon. The sooner you have a plan, the better you can action on it. But also, ultimately, most plans are about trade-offs. And so if you don't have a plan, my concern is always that you're going to be choosing a future almost accidentally because you haven't realized that you're actually making a choice and you're not making the trade-offs you need to do today so that they have the time to generate the returns you need to get to where you want to go in the future. So it's about knowing what your priorities are. It's about having that budget, linking it with a retirement plan, and being able to do all that and having that overview. And we can never actually reduce our financial anxiety to zero, and they're not really sure why, but it significantly reduces your anxiety having a financial plan. At Untangle Money, we see a 30% reduction with people who start with us and after they are done with a financial plan with us. So that's very beneficial.
Thank you, Kristine. We have 137 participants. Thank you very much for people taking the time. We brought in this session, Make Your Money Work for You, with our three great panelists from a real estate investment and taking control of your money and financial awareness as well, so that we can help you understand the interlink for all of those, because it's not just one thing at a time. So Jenny from our alumni relationships is helping us coordinate and manage this call behind the scene. Do we have any questions right now before I go to the next phase of our panels?
I think we're good to continue on, and we can do some questions towards the end.
Awesome, thank you. So we wanted to do another poll just to, will be a great segue for the next phase of our panel discussion. So Jenny, whenever you are ready. Yes. So as we learn a little bit about investing, how are you investing right now? We are very curious to know, is it in real estate with a financial advisor? I mean, robo-advisor is coming out pretty strong. I'm actually learning to do Wealthsimple. And for people who don't know, Wealthsimple is actually by an Ivy grad. Buying gold, art, shoes, or wine. While I am a shoe person, but I will say some of my shoes have not seen the daylight in the last year and a half. So probably not a great investment at this point. So we'll give it a few seconds for the panelists, 139 of them. Thank you very much. And we'll see a few more seconds and see what the responses come out. Thank you, Jenny. Great. It's very, very refreshing to know that we are 48% with a financial advisor. Great to know. I'm sure we'll make Madiha very happy that we're 26%, which is the next one. Robo-advisor is pretty close to. Well, art, shoes, and wine. Well, I guess that's good to know that we didn't spend money on during COVID on other things because there wasn't really much to spend on anyway. But as things are opening up, hopefully we will be spending money on other entertainment. So as I look at this, perhaps I'll turn back to David again. I've heard these terms called passive or active investing. Which one is better than the other, and what does it mean?
Okay, so first of all, difference between active and passive investing. When we talk about active and passive, we're really talking about styles of portfolio construction. So once you've decided to allocate resources to a portfolio, a passive strategy is one in which you're not trying to outperform any sort of reference index. You can think of a reference index as, say, the TSX or maybe the S&P 500 in the United States, but instead you're just trying to replicate the overall return experience of that reference index. Active investing, on the other hand, is where you're individually selecting investments that you believe have the possibility to actually outperform the reference index. Of course, the flip side of that is that they may not outperform, they may actually underperform the reference index. But that's at least what you're trying to do in an ideal scenario. One of the important things to think about here is you can do an active or passive strategy either on your own, doing it yourself, or with an advisor. A lot of times it's not as easy to do an active strategy with somebody like a robo-advisor. But keep in mind, if you're allocating 100% of your portfolio to a reference index of the TSX, not necessarily something that I'm recommending doing, but if you're doing that, you're making an active decision to allocate 100% to the TSX. So keep in mind, active and passive is really about the style of the way that you construct a portfolio. As to which one is better, I'm very agnostic when it comes to which style is better. There are different styles that can appeal to different personalities and different investor types. I think the more important thing is to understand yourself, understand your personality. Are you somebody that fundamentally enjoys looking at and choosing individual investments, and be very self-aware? Are you actually good at that? Because you might enjoy it, but you might actually not be good at it. If that's the case, then you may want to look at a passive strategy. On the other hand, there are times where, an active strategy may be good or not so good. It's really about understanding yourself. It's not necessarily that one is better or not. I tend to think of it as, if you're getting from point A to point B, there's a couple of different roadways that will get there, and it's about which one makes sense for you.
Thank you, David. That really helps to explain that. And it's interesting how the investment can be tied to your personality, and that also makes an impact as well. So as I turn as well in terms of the active and the passive, I think about the real estate investment. And Madiha, if I look at all you said about earlier about buying real estate now, it's absolutely, and I find it sometimes confusing. Do I buy a condo that's already built because I can see it right there? It's almost like, as I say, I'm a shoe person. I want to get the shoe right away, but do I want to go for pre-construction condos? That is something I'm not seeing. And there's also these, news that comes in about sometimes the development companies, they go bankrupt or they run out of money. So tell me about the pre-construction condos.
Sure. So most people are familiar with a real estate transaction
Right.
in the resale market, right? Because you've likely been through the experience of purchasing your own home. Buying pre-construction is quite different. So you're buying off, let's say, a condo. You're buying a condo, for example, from a floor plan. There's nothing to see or touch or feel because the condo and the building are not built yet. It will be built and ready to move in 3 to 5 years from today, and that depends on the builder's project schedule. So one of the reasons many buyers like pre-construction is the extended and flexible payment plans. So typical down payment plan for pre-construction condos around 15 to 20% of the purchase price. That's price of the unit plus parking and locker, should you wish to buy parking and locker. And that 20% is broken down into 4 or 5% installments, typically paid out in 18 months or so. But more recently, we've seen some builders offer more extended payment plans, such as 5% per year over the next 3 years or so. So the really great part about pre-construction investing is if you're not required to take on a mortgage today because there's nothing built yet, and you're not required to become a landlord today if this is an investment property, right? So essentially what you're doing with a pre-construction condo investment is putting down 20% and leveraging the builder's money for the construction of the building. And upon completion, your property would have appreciated in value over the course of whatever 4 to 5 years that it took to build. The appreciation on the asset value, but you've only put down 20% down, right? In terms of answering a question about whether the builders go bankrupt, there's risks attached to any type of investment out there with stocks, with real estate, and you try and best do your due diligence and mitigate those risks. So when it comes to pre-construction, how you can do that is go with the top builders, right? Because do your research on the builders, the top guys, the leaders in the industry. They have enough product on the market, they have the experience, and they also have the financial backing to go ahead and deliver and execute on these, right? It's a lucrative investment option in Toronto and across the country. Over 7,000 new condo units were sold just this past quarter in Toronto. So housing prices have increased rapidly. And as of just this morning's report on the October numbers, the cost of a detached home in the GTA rose 27.7% to 1.5 million. So condos are the more affordable option right now, and new pre-construction condos, they work great for first-time buyers, downsizers, and investors. You've got that extended and flexible payment plan.
Yeah, thank you, Madhya. I agree that it definitely allows us the flexibility in terms of giving us more time. And I hear you about the research and going with the top builders. Kristine, I want to come to you because as I hear Madhya and I hear David, in terms of Untangle Money, what do they offer to users when we're thinking about money and how we want to make it work for us?
Yeah, thanks. We're currently focused on a product that we have called the Mini. The Mini is a financial snapshot of where you are right now. It looks at your budget, we project it out into the future, and then we look at how adjustments might happen. So we can tell you what a change in $100 of your cost of living will do to your retirement needs. And we can tell you what percentage change in the rate of return on your investments is going to do to both your budget and your retirement. We base all of our algorithms on female financial lives. Female financial lives are really different than male financial lives. Is it okay if I dive into how they're different now, or do you want me to hold that for later? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So women, as we know, the wage gap, we make less money. We go into industries that make less money. And then we spend about 25% less time in the paid workforce than men. These are aggregate numbers, but that's due to maternity leave, but it's also due to elder care responsibilities for both our parents and our partners' parents. We pay more for goods and services throughout our lifetime. Good Housekeeping pegs that at $2,500 a year. And in fact, mortgages are one of the places where we tend to pay more. So it's big ticket items, which is not great. And our salaries peak about 15 years earlier than men. So some of this is easier to see in visually. So I did add a PowerPoint or PDF that you can take a look at. But women's salaries peak in around 40, men's salaries peak in and around 55, and they make about $10,000 to $20,000 every single year for those 25 years that they can allocate towards things like retirement, like education plans, like starting another business. We just don't have that capacity. And you have this enormous industry out there that's not talking to half of their clients well and not conveying that their lives are different. So there's no ability for women to mitigate that. So if I was to start retirement planning at 40 and I'm following the average trajectory, I won't be able to find that capacity because I'm going to hit that glass ceiling. I'm not going to progress through middle management as much. I'm going to be put into pink islands. We know we're not seeing women, McKinsey's showing we're not seeing women getting put into financial positions and operations where they're in line for positions like the CEO. Even in law, we saw the Globe and Mail expose, female partners are making less. There's a variety of reasons why, but sadly, if you are a female in a professional environment, so a lot of MBA or HBAs in those fields, the pay gap is actually bigger. We know that there's a ton. All of this culminates into something called the wealth gap. The wealth gap is that for every dollar a man has in net wealth, a woman has 32 cents. We know that it's trending in the wrong direction. 10 years ago, it was 36 cents. So we believe that women need financial products and financial plans based on their financial lives. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristine. That is true. I don't know how many people have read the McKinsey study, but that would be good. And apologies for the phone that's coming in through because I have a MacBook. So if I turn off the phone, it doesn't stop there. It's coming in through MacBook as well. So technology and Zoom and the wonderful world of working remote, everyone. I want to pause here and ask Jenny on the alumni relations for us. We've got 135 participants right now. And are there any questions we want to take?
There are. So there's one in the chat, and then I've had a couple submitted separately. So the one from the chat is it better to invest in a Tfsa or an Rrsp if you had to choose?
I'm happy to take that one. The cutoff is $50,000. If you make less than $50,000, you should prioritize a Tfsa. For the years you're making more than $50,000, you'll want to prioritize your Rrsp. And the reason is that it's the tax advantages that you're getting from those accounts. You're not getting enough tax advantage on your Rrsp in the years you're earning less than $50,000. For high income earners, this could happen in years where you're taking EI for maternity leave and things like that. So even if you are making more than that overall for those years, it's good to know that number. Women need to prioritize both. We tend to need both for retirement to make our retirement numbers.
Thank you, Kristine. Seems like we've got a few more questions, Jenny. Do we want to?
Maybe just a follow on from this one. The question is, why do they say that business owners should avoid Rrsps? So maybe is that a fallacy, or I don't know, David, maybe you want to?
I can maybe tackle that. I'm not sure who they are in this case, but let's assume that they are, certain financial professionals. So listen, Rrsps are a really relatively old financial planning tool that we have in Canada. The roots of Rrsps go back to the 1950s. In previous generations, we didn't have things like tax-free savings accounts and, all of these various planning tools that thankfully we have now. So there is a little bit of maybe a generational difference in the way that people tend to think about Rrsps. But I think what the question is referring to is this notion that if you are a business owner who presumably has your business incorporated, maybe you own the shares of an operating company through a holding company, you can get fancier than that as well. You can in turn have the shares of a holding company owned by a family trust. And it's well beyond the conversation here to get into that. But the bottom line is there are tools that are available to you as a business owner in terms of building wealth inside a holding company and various tools like that may potentially render some of the advantages of Rrsps less significant than they'd otherwise be if you had sort of your typical 9-to-5 salaried position. So I think that's probably why they say to avoid RSPs as a business owner. But again, every situation is different. And as Kristine sort of referred to, we often will say that there's a balance. And so maybe there's a happy medium where there is some RSP contributions alongside corporate savings.
That's great. I'm going to jump, there's a number of investment questions, but I'm going to jump to a real estate question that was submitted just to me. And that is, should I wait to save the full 20% down payment before getting into the real estate market?
So that's a very frequently asked question. And that's tricky because while you're saving your 20%, the prices are increasing as well, right? So it's really hard to actually catch up. There's different ways of getting into real estate. You can still buy your home without the full 20%. You get, there's mortgage products that you can get into for that. Or the other easier way is the pre-construction condos or pre-construction homes where the deposit structure is more extended and flexible. So you don't have to come up with the 20% on the day you're signing the contract. You can choose projects that are offering 5% per year. So it's staggered. It helps save towards the next investment, next payment option. And it helps you get into the market today. And the other thing we're seeing a trend more recently is co-investing. So people, the younger folks especially, are not doing it alone. You're doing it with friends or family, and you're getting into the market. The idea is to get into the market as early as you can because the prices are increasing, and getting a little bit more creative on ways to do so.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump back to a gender-related question, and that is, given the different financial plan needs of women, should women be doing a separate financial plan from their husbands if they have one?
Yeah, this is a tricky question. We know that 41.5% of women who are single, divorced, or widowed over the age of 65 in Canada live below poverty. We also know this is an American stat from Elevest, that 75% of women or 74% of women get a negative financial surprise upon retirement because they've outsourced it to their husbands, and their husbands weren't as good at it as they had hoped. None of that information ever seems to flow down. So I just wanted to share those stats with you. I think it's prudent to get one done separately. I would get one done separately and just make sure you understand what the levers are, what your boundaries are, what your trade-offs are. Make sure you're on the same page. Figure out if you have differences or if you have different needs. Chances are you're going to live 6 to 8 years longer, and you'll want to make sure you have enough funds for that. So I would recommend it, but it's a personal decision. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jenny. Should we go into one more question, or do we have time for it?
Yes, I think we do have time for one more. And I'll ask more of a general one. So I'm seeing a few specifics in the chat, and I will mention that we'll be sharing the LinkedIn profiles of all of our panelists. I'll drop those into the chat so that you can reach out directly with more profile specific questions. The general question, and I think it might be more for David, is how is retirement different for today's professionals compared to what it's been for previous generations?
Okay, this is always a fun one because one of the things that always frustrates me is the various commercials that you'll see of sort of a senior couple on a boat somewhere sailing, and that's really not the way that people live. Ideas about retirement, just like ideas on a number of different fronts, have evolved as time goes on. Retirement means different things to different people and to different generations. In previous generations, you would have a significant percentage of the population was it unionized or otherwise had access to a company pension. That is far less common, still happens, but it's far less common these days. And so this concept of, you hit 65 and you kind of ring the bell and you're finished. That's not a reality that we see nearly as much anymore. People are living longer just demographically. They're doing different things. The things that a 70-year-old might do today versus what a 70-year-old might have done, say, in the 1960s or the 1970s, completely different. A couple of years back, I went to a Rolling Stones concert, and that's sort of the archetype for, how retirement has been redefined. People are doing different things. They might be retiring from their day job, but they might actually be taking on a very busy role in philanthropy, or they might be going back to school to take courses that have always interested them, and they've just never had the chance. So retirement is really, think of it as not just, an end in itself. It's just the next phase of life that doesn't necessarily have the same, 9 to 5 where you're working for a paycheck, but you still might be very, very busy doing other things. And really what it comes down to is having control over what it is that you do and how you want to do it. That to me is the key of how retirement's changed.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Jenny. I think what I want to, this is so informative, and obviously there's so much information out there. What I'm hearing loudly from all three panelists, at least to me, is there's lots of different options. And they are very related to what you want and who you are, not necessarily someone else telling you what to do. It's always a good time to buy real estate, because otherwise you can hear the latest stats this morning as of semi-detaches went up 27%. So every day you wait, the prices are going up. And there's flexible options in how you can save that, as David has articulated, and so did Kristine. So I understand we are almost coming to an end, and we've got 131 participants as of now. I want to go around the panel and ask them and take a minute to, if you want our participants to have a lasting remark from you to stay with, what would that be? Madiha, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. I would say like I said before, it's not about timing the market, because that's tricky. It's about the time you spend in the market. And real estate is buy now and hold for the longer term.
Thank you, Madiha. David?
Thanks, Inka. If I could boil sort of most of the things that I've sort of said this afternoon, it would be to have that self-awareness and to know yourself. We all have different skill sets. Some of the things we're really, really excellent at, and other things we're not as excellent at. To me, the biggest single thing that you can do right now to improve your situation is have that self-awareness and understand who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and really where the best use of your time is going to be going forward. And then applying that to your own situation. I think that's going to do wonders to take you to where you want to ultimately get to.
Thank you, David. Kristine?
Yes, so mine is, please share what you learned about women in money today with the women that you love in your lives. And on a personal side, do something today. Start today. Use Wealthsimple's retirement calculator. Open a robo-advising account. Use Untangle Money to get your mini. Do something to start today. Time is your biggest ally when it comes to your investments, and today is the youngest you're ever going to be. So take an action, diarize it, and you can do it.
Great. Thank you so much, Madiha, Kristine, and David, for taking the time out of your busy lives. I think everyone's life is busy, and that goes to all our 139 participants at one point we had. You cannot imagine how elated we are with your time and actually being involved in this. I know that we will be sending out a survey, and we appreciate your honest feedback. We also want anything that you want to hear more about, whether it's real estate, whether it's investment, or whether it's just awareness, financial awareness, please let us know. Your feedback is important. So once again, thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great afternoon and evening and a great week.